Welcome to another video from Cardboard East. My name's Jay. I play board games from Asia and share what I find with all of you. Buckle up because we're going to go Titan versus Titan. Yokohama versus Yokohama. Now in this video I'm going to talk about what Yokohama is, why the designers decided to make a game about Yokohama. I'll give you a brief example of how to play the game, as well as show the differences between the 2016-2017 edition. This is the deluxe version from TMG Deluxe Games, and this is the 2024 brand new release from Synapses Games in France, as well as give you my overall thoughts. But first, I want to talk to you about Raw. Now, if you watched my content before, or this is your first time, please consider liking and subscribing to help the channel grow. But if you want to help the channel grow even more, please consider joining my Patreon. I clearly redone the tiers, so you can be a producer and have your name at the end of your video. You can have access to videos, weekly vlog videos that I keep on the Patreon itself, as well as the final tier, winning a game for free. Now, there'll be a lottery for every month from those top tier Patreon supporters, and this month I'm giving away Raw. Now, this is the retail edition. It's brand new. I am getting rid of it because I have the Pharaoh edition. Also, what's really exciting is that 25th Century Games just announced that they're going to be launching a crowdfunding campaign for the new expansion for Raw, and I couldn't be excited for it because this is the quintessential way to re-implement an old game from the aughts. Because Raw is a very classic Knizia game, and this, I think, is a stellar production of how to do that well. And now, back to the show. So, Hisashi Hayashi, who's one of the most prolific designers out of Japan, designed a game called Yokohama, and it is the highest ranked board game on BGG. Now, Scout is a higher ranked card game, also from Japan, but Yokohama is the highest ranked board game from Japan on BGG. So let's talk about why Hisashi Hayashi designed a game about Yokohama. Number one, he lives there. He lives in Yokohama. Yokohama is a port city just south of Tokyo. In fact, Tokyo Bay itself, the waters are quite turbulent and it's difficult for boats to go in and out of there, whereas the seas around Yokohama are quite calm and much easier for bigger ships to go in and out. So Yokohama is the port city of Japan. But why Yokohama? Why does this game take place in Yokohama? Well, giving you a brief history, and this video will be segmented, so if you want to skip this history part and go straight to the component comparison, please, by all means, do. But I think you're going to be missing something that's really special about Yokohama and why I think it deserves its place in the BGG Top 200. Yokohama is a city of many firsts in Japan. It had the first ice cream shop, the first beer, the first gas-powered lights on the streets. And the reason why is because, well, Japan was, after 150 years of civil war, generations of nothing but blood, honor, and sword, Tokugawa Ieyasu succeeded in unifying the country, and the country had an unparalleled 250 years of peace. That all changed, though, when Matt Perry decided to stop by with his American gunship and say, "Open your borders or else, and I'll give you a year." He came back 6 months later, and Japan had no choice but to sign a very unfair agreement for them. And there weren't any taxes on exports. And once that precedent happened, all these other foreign powers came. England came, France came, the Dutch were always there. But more and more of these foreign powers came with more and more unfavorable contracts to Japan, and Japan realized that it had to modernize really quickly or end up losing to all these foreign powers. So they decided to completely and radically change their entire culture. They got rid of their caste-like system, so now anyone from anywhere could be anything that they wanted to. The education system changed. Although women still didn't have as many rights as men did, boys and girls entered into school learning the exact same things, learning the Western ideology and learning these concepts to help change the face of Japan as quickly as possible. And Yokohama was the main port of entry and was the first city to kind of discover all these foreign technologies, cultures, and blend it with Japanese society. And that's why Yokohama was home to the first ice cream, the first beer shop, first certain type of makeup. And there's a huge list online. You can find all those things. And it has this beautiful history of how East met West and how it became this new Japan. Historians often call this era the Meiji Restoration. And that's where Japan went from this feudal state to a modern state. In fact, the yen, which is the currency of this game and the currency of Japan, is brand new at this point. By the time this game is taking place, the currency of yen was only introduced for a couple of years, meaning that this whole idea of commerce, of just potential of you could be anything you want if you have the gumption and know-how and the entrepreneurial spirit, could be yours. And that's what makes Yokohama so special, I think, because this idea of becoming anything that you want, of having just unlimited ways to success, are really well represented in the gameplay. And before I go on talking more about Japanese history, let's get to the gameplay and do a component comparison. And here we are with the 2017 Deluxe Edition from Akazu brand and Tasty Mitchell Games. May they rest in peace. And the 2024 release of Yokohama by Synapses. Now, while this is obviously, that Ticket to Ride box and this is thinner, I do want to mention that going forward, that please keep in mind that this is, roughly 8 or 7 years old in graphic design, and this is, this year. But I think the most important thing is looking on the inside first. So let's go ahead and get that done. So right out of the way, you can see that this has a lot of space up here. Once you punch everything out, there's quite a lot of space here. This did not come with an insert. In fact, I also want to point out that the scoreboard here is 0 to 100. You have to place this somewhere on the table, and this does take up quite a bit of table space. Stickers came with the Deluxe Edition. You have a nice rule book. The rule book for this one has a pretty text heavy. It doesn't have too much of a dynamic layout, so it can make it a little bit of a bear to get through. This insert is one that I had to buy for the game. It did not come with the game itself. And then you can see here all the components inside. Where on contrast, the Synapses Edition, these are the regular components that came with the base game. I got the premium tokens as well. And then here you can see the insert that comes with the game. My favorite part about this are these resource trays that come with the game. And you could fit even the premium editions as well as the tokens of the base game. And it's even fancier because it has this nice little cover to help keep them protected. Now, I did think it was weird that they put the tea leaves in this bin as opposed to this bin. You're using these resources more often, so I just put them together. But the imports tokens just fit nicely here because they're more of a rare commodity. Also, I do want to point out that while there is a lot of space for these metal coins, and you could probably put these in fewer compartments, you're definitely going to need those spaces if you have the cardboard tokens. Now, I don't have it in me to get rid of these tokens, at least not just yet, but you can use them as well. I have never had an issue with running out of resources with these. In fact, the number of these resources matches the exact number of the TMG production. One of the things I do love here is that there are these little finger cuts, which makes it easier to pull components out. Here are the new player boards. You flip these over for your player aids, and you have this room here. Now, I can't fit all these components in here. It's just a little too snug, so I like to give them a little bit more space. These are the dual layer player boards that go with the locations. They fit in nice and snug here. Here's your canal. And then these are the big player boards, or not, I'm sorry, the big market boards where you have like the technology cards, you have the order cards, as well as the church and the government. And then here are all the fancy new punch board goals for the game. You're only supposed to do 3, A, B, and C. The original had cards, and I'll go ahead and compare and contrast in just a little bit, but I just want to show you everything here. And these finger cuts here make pulling everything out nice and simple. These are the technology cards. They have with upgraded art. And then you have the order cards, also with a new UI system. And here are the location tiles. Once again, it's so easy to pull out because of these little finger cuts here. They did a really good job with this insert. I'm very impressed. Now, the locations have this nice new artwork on the back, and you can see here they have the +3 and +4 for the 4-player games. And on the front, they have a completely new UI and graphics for them. I'll do a compare and contrast in just a little bit. But I also want to show you the premium tokens box. Now, the premium tokens box only has the tokens in the game. I showed you them earlier. You can fit those in there and replace the base tokens and put them in the bags like I did over here. If you really want to keep this for whatever reason, I don't know why you would. I mean, this will not fit in here. It just won't. And there really is no reason to keep this separate because no one's going to take these when they can get the upgraded fancy bits. So as you can see, I definitely think that the new version definitely gets a point here for the inserts and having to be extremely well organized. And there's also space for any potential expansions that could happen in the future. Now, before we compare and contrast the actual resources, I wanted to take a look at the order cards. This is the older version. This is the newer version. You can see that this one always had them in this formation and then just how many of those resources were there. Whereas this one has them slightly in a different configuration and without numbers. In fact, here's another order card. And you can see here, this one needs 2 fish, whereas in the older version, they just put a number 2 here for that. I also do want to point out that if you look closely, these are the exact same order cards. And you can see here, this is number 19, and this is also number 19. So this is the exact game that you're getting. Except the layout is a little bit different. Now, why I wanted to show these to you is that when we compare and contrast the resources, like you see here, you have the fish, the old fish, and then here you have the new fish. Where this one definitely matches this more. You have the brick, which is a much chunkier brick. These pieces overall are much chunkier. And the clay here has this nice little line here for some silk screen printing. Speaking of silk, here's the silk here where it does match the color barely. I personally see more of the white than I do of this color. Whereas the pink here matches perfectly with this pink resource here. You also have the monstrous tea leaf, which is quite big and chunky compared to this now 4-leaf tea leaf here. Now, I think the biggest thing is that these are just chunkier bits and these are a little bit smaller, but they all have silk screens on them. The import is quite a big chunky piece here, whereas this one here is a little bit daintier. But you can definitely see the harder lines here as well. So overall, it's a little bit of a toss-up. I do like that these have chunkier bits, but I also like that these, well, just overall just look better, I think. The silk screening has really improved, I guess, over the years, and they match the resources here a little bit more. And I tend to like these slightly more, even though I do appreciate the size of these components. But let's also talk about money, because money is also one of the most important things in the game. And you can see here, these are the newer versions. They are smaller, not as chunky as the older ones. And you can see that these have this nice thickness to them, where these are a little thinner. The cool thing is that if you got the regular edition of the old TMG Yokohama, you could definitely buy these premium bits and use them for your older version. There's no reason why they couldn't work. But these just aren't as chunky as the older ones. Some people feel a little bit upset that you have nothing but English here, and here you have the Japanese of just 2 characters. I mean, as much as I love seeing that, the whole idea of Yokohama is that they're reaching out and blending the culture, and seeing a big 3 here is just easier to see during the gameplay. Flipping over, you can both see the emblems here of the yen, and this one has 1 and this one has 3. Going off into the 1, you can also see that this is roughly the same thing. You have this nice big 1 here, so it's easier to see at a distance. And on the back, you could see the 1 emblem there. This is a really tough call. I really like having this being seen here. It's really easy to read from a distance. And this, you just have size and color, but I really like the thickness to these bits. I gotta say, I feel conflicted. I think these have a better UI, but these are just chunkier and just have a better tactile feel to them. Now, I do admit that TMG had a nice, big, chunky station token that's only used for 1 tech card, and then this one comes in a nice little dainty counter. I mean, it's pretty, but it's not the same. TMG wins. Next, you have the first player marker. They're both sailboats. I mean, they're 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Both are seen to be kind of nice. Obviously, I think if this one were silk printed, it would win, but this one is silk printed, and it looks a little bit nicer and smoother. I think I could see myself going either way, not really caring too much. Now here are the 5 power bonus tokens that you can see here. These are smaller, but they definitely pop more with that purple background, whereas these kind of blend into the background of the location tile. Also, as you can see here, this has the mini expansion that did come out for Yokohama, but is extremely hard to find. This one just comes with it. So you do get that mini expansion, which is, well, to be honest, very, very nice and just opens up the game a lot more. Now, it wouldn't be Yokohama without foreign delegates. As you can see here, once again, you get chunkier bits. And this one, you just have cardboard, but they are easier to read, especially with the flags. And once again, I do have to say that the new version does come with the mini expansion that you have here. This comes with the game, and this is extremely helpful, I think, especially because there's another Dutch flag that allows you to just get all 5 flags. Because without this, it makes it really, really difficult. Here we can see the original player boards. Here are your starting resources. Here's a nice brief summary of your turn. And it is not dual layered, so you just place your pieces directly on here, your assistants, shops, and trade houses, and here is the end game scoring. Now compare this to the new version, where it is dual layered. You place your pieces directly in here, and you can see that the scoreboard is now up on top of every player's player board. So you no longer have this giant scoreboard somewhere off to the side. You now have it right here. You see this is your 0 to 10, and this increases by decimals of 10, so or intervals of 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 52, 90, and then you have 0 and 100. If you break 200, it's probably going to be towards the end of the game, so it won't be too big of a deal. Usually I just put 2 workers here. Here's the end game scoring in the middle, and then here are the workers here. You can see the little icons are off as well for the scoring, as well as, I guess, removing people from your warehouse. Now, there isn't a turn summary here because they included a more detailed turn summary for each player, and it is dual-sided, so you have the quick turn summary, and then you also have end-game conditions and the final score calculation. But the biggest takeaway is that this old school scoreboard is no longer on your table. Now, probably the most contentious thing that people argue about are the location boards. This is the original from the Deluxe Edition here. You see these are the variable score things for the trade show houses. And in the game, you can be placing your workers on here, and you'll just drop them down like so onto here. Now, the problem is that because there isn't much real estate to put your people, it does cover up this important part here. And when you add houses, it's fine. You can just add houses here, just like this on here. And this becomes quite crowded, and it does block this area where you can see this. Now, you could place it here, but this information is probably the most important that you need to keep so people can see what's the reason why you want to go to this location. And this is fine, and it's serviceable. And to be honest, it isn't that much of a problem, although this is a little shaky here. Now, compare this with the new version, and you can see that removing the houses from the board and placing them here doesn't obscure the view. In fact, you can never cover this up, and it's always visible. And because the assistants are a little smaller, as well as your boss is a little smaller, there's a lot more space here. So that way it doesn't obscure anything that's really important. It doesn't cover up any information. One thing that some people did notice that they thought was weird was that in the original version, you have the name of the location. Right here, you can see this is a research center. Here, you could say that this is Research Center B. And some people were odd and felt odd and upset about that. And I did too, to be fair. But after playing the game, you know that this is the Research Center, and I mean, it's the only place that has gears. This has gears here. And I never really stopped to think, oh, what is this location? And by removing this, you created more space. And it works even more so when you have like the newer versions, like the Employment Center here, or the bank, I'm sorry, where there's just tons of open space for workers to go. And that by having this building area separate, it creates more space and it's not as cluttered. Now, I do want to point out though that by having the buildings vertical, it does bring this kind of sense that the city is being built up, and you can kind of see it has this nice 3D, almost toy-like aspect to the game. Whereas here, the pieces are just placing down, and it's a little bit more function as opposed to form. But it is a lot cleaner to look at, and it's much easier to see. Also, by having these buildings here, they don't obscure the view of any of these, even though that's not too much of a problem. I also do want to point out that the backs of these have this gorgeous artwork here. Absolutely gorgeous. Whereas the backs of the original, well, I mean, they're just kind of plain looking. Nothing wrong with that, but it is nice to see a nice little touch like this on a game. Now here we see the church management board of the Deluxe Edition from TMG, and you can hear the scoring here. And then this is the end game reminder of, whoever has the most has 6 points, and the fewest, or the second most, has 3 points. Now this is replaced with the newest version. Now this one has holes here so that the meeples don't shake around. And here you can see the end game scoring here as well. It doesn't have the name, it just has the icon. But most importantly, I think the biggest distinction is that this has the end game trigger on the board, whereas the original, it did not. And you just had to remember that it's 5, 5, and 6, whereas on the newer version, it's already printed onto the board itself. So for me, this obviously wins. This little part here, it's one less thing that I have to remember when I play the game. Also, the artwork and the icons are, I don't know, a little prettier and easier on the eyes. Also, this is so gorgeous to look at. And then flipping it over on the back, you can see the art unobstructed with symbology, and then flipping this on the back, you could see, well, nothing. Next, we have the achievement cards that you usually put here. You have A, B, and C, and it comes with an entire deck of them, labeled A, B, and C. You take one of each and place it here on the board as well, and you place this onto the scoreboard. And because the scoreboard doesn't exist in the new edition, and it's on each individual player boards, they gave these tiles instead, and so now, instead of cards, well, you have tiles with A, B, and C, and you'll just take one of each and then place them out here for people to look at. And this is a little bit cleaner, and it has this dual layer holes for the meeples. And I don't know, I think it's an upgrade. Next up, the technology cards. Here you see the old version, here is the new version, and you can see the old one has this very functional, very clean artwork. Gaslight. When you put a shop, 2 points, and it's also France. And then here you have this the art is so much better, much more improved. The font is a little bit smaller though, and so is the icon. But perhaps the component that completely shows the difference between the two editions is the canal. And you can see here, it's very clean, very functional. And then now, here is the new version where it's very clean, also functional, but very nice to look at. Here's a nice, simple rules summary. I'm not gonna go too into detail because I do think there are more videos that are designed for that and do a much better job than I will. But I'm just gonna give you a general overview of how you play the game. On your turn, the first thing you're gonna do is decide between one or two things. You're either gonna take 2 assistants and put them into the same place, or you're gonna take 3 assistants and put them in 3 different locations. Then you're gonna move your CEO, who may or may not be already on the board, and then they're just gonna follow a trail of breadcrumbs of your workers. So I could just move my CEO from here all the way to here, and then I would trigger this area. Now, it's really important to note that the whole idea of this game is this logistical trail. So for example, if I wanted to go to this location, I couldn't because I didn't have a worker there. Or even if, let's say, I had workers up here, well, then there's nowhere for my CEO to go because there's no workers in these areas. And figuring out that logistical puzzle is the fun of the game. But eventually, you're gonna go somewhere. So let's go here to the technology area. I'll move my CEO here, and I'm gonna count how many pieces I have. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have a power of 4, and then I'm gonna take the action that's labeled 4. And this will give me 4 gears, and that'll allow me to buy a technology card that's 4 gears or less. In addition to that, if I had, let's say, a 5th worker here, so now my power is 5, well, now I can also get this little bonus token here. Now this gives me just more fish, but they can do lots of different things. They can give you like more imports, they give you more coins, they give you other resources, but I'll just take this bonus and I'll keep it to myself. And if I ever have 4 or 5 power, you notice this little house here, and that's because I could take one of my houses and then build it on here. I could even put it here, or I can put my trade house here. Now, what's really important about these houses is that if I ever revisit this place here, the first time it was 5, but now I have 5, 6, 7. I have 7 gears. You can only build one house or shop or trade house at a time, so do keep that in mind. But now every time I come here, I just need fewer assistants with me because I'm always going to max out at 5 gears. It's also important to note that if your opponent ever goes to this location, because you have a trade house here, not a shop, a trade house, well then you're gonna get $1 from the bank. Also, there's an incentive to build your shops and trade houses here because you can see here you get points, you remove people, you get coins and more points, and this one gives you 6 points here. So there's a lot of incentive as to building these quite quickly. Now, Yokohama is a big city and there's lots of things going on. There's different things that you could do. You can get resources. This gives you fish, clay, you have tea leaves, you have the silk area up here up north, and then you also have here the bank that's going to give you more money depending on how many workers you send there. This one will allow you to remove more workers or more buildings from your player board because you have to unlock them first before you can build or use them. You also have here, which is the church, and this will give you end game scoring for points as well. And then you also have the customs office here, and you'll use these import tokens to gain a lot of victory points for end game scoring as well. And because you're getting different types of resources, there are also orders that you can complete, and that also scores points in the game. Now, you may have noticed that this is a modular board, so the modules are all going to be in a different arrangement every single time you play, giving a little bit more replayability for the game. Because where they are, what's next to what, could change your strategy for that particular game. And there are various endgame triggers, and once a game is triggered, you'll complete that round, and then you'll see who has the most points, and the most points wins Yokohama. So, spoiler alert, I love this game. I rank this in my top 10 greatest games from Japan, and it's one of my personal favorites. I absolutely love it. Board Game Sanctuary, which is this great channel, if you haven't checked out his content, you definitely do because he makes some really, really great content. He said in one of his Instagram posts that some board games just have a vibe, and Yokohama definitely has a vibe, no matter which edition that you have. But I'm going to go a step further and say the best board games have a vibe. And the vibe in Yokohama is anything you want to make it. It's this sense of, I have these components, these starting blocks to build this empire, and how I choose to do that is completely up to me. And I love how the endgame triggers are also player controlled, and so that players can dictate when the game ends and how. And there are games that do this, but not in the simplistic way it is. You put some workers down, move your CEO, take an action. Wash, rinse, repeat. Do that for like an hour to 90 minutes, and you're gonna have a great time. Now, I do wanna mention that this is the exact game. The math didn't change. The order cards are the exact same, just a different UI. The technology cards are the exact same, just different graphic design and a different UI system. You are getting the exact game. Even the number of resources that you get are the same in these editions. Now, this is the deluxe edition with the premium resource tokens. If you have the retail edition of this, you can pick up just these and upgrade your version of the game just fine. You're not gonna have a problem. Are these absolutely necessary? No. I would say that nothing on the shelf is absolutely necessary. But I do think that these components really add this nice tactile feel to the game, whether you have the deluxeified version or you have the premium tokens from Synapses Games. With that component comparison, I compared and contrast all the components of these two, and it's a tough choice. It really is. I really like the chunkier bits in this one, but I really like how simple and easy it is to tell the components from this one. One of the interesting things I didn't expect was that I wasn't thinking I would like dual layered boards, but I really do like dual layered boards because people bump the table all the time, or I might move and brush up against something and have things spill, and it happens. It just happens. And with dual layer boards, that's not a problem anymore. I'm not saying that this is a bad design because this was a fantastic design in 2016 and 2017. This is one of the first deluxeified board games way back in the day. But the dual layer boards are great and they do a number of things. Most importantly, those locations get cluttered with having the buildings be on top of them. Because now this little rectangle has buildings, has workers, has a boss, as well as like charts for symbology, and it gets really cramped really fast. In fact, I would probably say that's the biggest negative for this game, is that the locations get cramped and sometimes you can't see the iconography on the location. Whereas these removed the houses from the space and put it down below, and I think it's a much cleaner effect. Now, there is this weird trade-off though, because your houses are put sideways into that area. so you could see them, whereas these buildings are kind of put straight up. So you have a little bit more of that 3D feel of a town building and expanding. Whereas this one, everything's just kind of flat, and a little bit more functional. I do like that feel of seeing the city built, but I do like having a board where I can just read what's going on at a glance very easily. Now, I must say that a lot of people felt weird about the point scoring, the scoreboard, should I say. And the scoreboard for this game takes up a lot of space, even at 2 players. You play this at 4, it's a beast that takes up a lot of table space. And getting rid of the scoreboard and putting it onto the player boards is actually a really good idea, because the scoreboard is, well, it's frustrating. And I would say that people would complain about, well, maybe you can't compare the scores that well. How can I tell how I'm doing compared to everyone else? And that's a fair complaint. But I would say that I usually play this game at 2 and 3, less often at 4. And even at the 3-player count, I could easily see everyone's score. And you could just, from a glance, and I could just see how the scoreboard is on their player board. And it's quite apparent of who's winning and who's not. Because everyone's going to say, like, oh, I got 8 points, I get 10 points, I scored 22 points. And you're going to definitely feel that. So while this has a better tactile, chunkier bits, I think this one is just better for readability. And it's just, the whole design is clean. Not to mention, I think the art is an upgrade. And some people didn't like the art, and I don't understand why. The publisher went through painstaking tasks of researching old photos of Yokohama and redoing art that is actually representational of that time period that it was in. And I think they did a stellar job with this game. So it's pretty apparent that if you've never played Yokohama, this is by far the best version to get. Maybe you might find one of these cheaper. Maybe. They're a little bit hard to track down, and sometimes they can be quite pricey. I think when I was looking for this one, it might have been $200. Whereas this, right now, with the premium components, could be anywhere from $80 to $90, depending if there's a sale or not, or a retailer, or where do you live. But the big question that people are asking online is, if I have this deluxe edition, do I need this version? And that's a tough call. Not to mention that this includes the 2 mini expansions that came for these, which is impossible to find. And I think those mini expansions are really, really important, because they definitely open up the game more. You get more foreign delegates, so you have extra actions. You have another chance to get flags, which is really, really important. Well, not super important, but it's just a nice thing to do, so you have more flags and more points for the end-game scoring. Obviously, everyone's financial situation is different, and let's not kid ourselves. As much as I love board gaming, I do think that a lot of board gamers don't realize that this is a luxury hobby that we have. So I'm going to say that I am going to get rid of this version, and I am going to keep the Synapse version. That's right. Part of me, deep down inside, kind of wants to take some bits from here and put them into here, and then I can have my own special hybrid version. But I think I'd rather give this away to another gamer, and that way it could see play. And maybe I'll just give this away as a future Patreon prize for my monthly giveaways. I haven't really decided yet. But I do think that how clean it looks, how much nicer it feels, and just it's the faster setup. This one comes with an insert, which is huge. And the insert is fantastic. They did a stellar job with that insert. There's no insert in here, and you kind of have to find a way to go to Etsy, go to Thingiverse, and download and make your own. Not to say that's bad, it's just back then, inserts, did exist for some games, but they weren't a thing like they are today. So this one is just more of the norms of standard board game production for 2024. But the theme is the exact same for both, but I do think the art carries the theme more. I think there's more replayability. With this one, it's faster set up with those great inserts. It has excellent premium components. Each of them have a nice little screen. The components match the icons on the cards. This is a new edition done right. And I think Synapse deserves a big round of applause for doing such an excellent job. I give this 2 thumbs up, and I strongly recommend you give Yokohama a try if you haven't already, because it's one of the best. Once again, my name's Jay. I play board games from Asia and share what I find with all of you. If this is your first time here, stick around, chill out, watch all these videos, see my top 100. See my top 100 where I talk about Yokohama in front of a giant Gundam at Yokohama. Because how could you not do that? By the way, I'll put a link here for another video for you to check out, and I'll see you there. See you next week.